Good morning, good afternoon, students. Good evening also, late afternoon. Is my voice audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am sharing the slide. We are looking at biodiversity and conservation, the unit of biodiversity and conservation. So if you remember, we looked at what are the different causes of biodiversity, what are the different levels of biodiversity. Then, if you remember, we also looked at a very important concept, which is called as biodiversity hotspots. There are 34 hotspots in the whole world, out of which you know that there are 4 hotspots. So who can tell me quickly which are the 4 hotspots in India? Anyone?
Western Ghats.
Yes, Saurabh. Or
Western
you can
Ghats.
write it in the chat box also. Okay, correct. Eastern Himalayas, very good. Yes, Western Ghats. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, that is correct. So that is Western Ghats, then Sundaland, correct. So Sundaland is your Andaman Nicobar regions. Very good. Yes, Saurabh is saying Indo-Burma, correct. So yes, correct. The Himalayas, I mean the Eastern Himalayas, not just the Himalayas, the Eastern Himalayas, the Western Ghats, Indo-Burma region, and Sundaland. So these are the 4 hotspots which are there in India, right? Then, if you remember, we also looked at the different levels or the different causes of biodiversity, in which you remember that we saw genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Okay, and we saw examples of each of these, of how they affect biodiversity. Then a very important phenomenon of endemism. Okay? Endemism versus invasive species or toxic or exotic species. Yes. Then yesterday we also spoke about the different threats to biodiversity, right? So before we actually begin looking at what are the different threats to biodiversity, let's look at the olive ridley turtles. If you remember, I told you yesterday, they are very characteristic to the coast of Orissa. They, the adults migrate to the coast and they lay their eggs on the coast, out of which the young ones will hatch out. They will then enter into the ocean. They become mature as adults in the ocean. They again breed and they come to lay the eggs back to the coast, right? So this is the life of a sea turtle. Now, a very characteristic sea turtle that we see in India are these olive ridley turtles. Yeah, so I'm sharing my screen again. It's a very well made video and it's a short video. It talks about the life cycle of these olive ridley turtles and also very important, the threats to them. Yeah, so we will discuss the threats that are seen for these turtles after we discuss the video, right? Okay, so just, and I'm keeping the subtitles on, so in case if the video lags, then you can read it also. Okay, I'm sharing the screen. Okay, is it visible? Can you see the video, everyone?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's a TED video, a TED Ed video, TED education video.
Sea turtles are miraculous. First, they've been around since the late Jurassic, roughly 150 million years ago. Cohorts of the dinosaurs, sea turtles have survived through the challenges of eons, existing still today where many others have ended their evolutionary run. Second, throughout the centuries and up till today, every living adult sea turtle has overcome the odds, existing as a consequence of chance, skill, and capability. The gauntlet each sea turtle faces in the course of its lifetime goes thus. First, deposit as a clutch of leathery ping-pong ball-sized eggs into a nesting pit dug by its mother high on the beach. Of the 50 to 200 eggs laid, roughly 20% will never hatch. Roughly a month and a half after laid, the surviving eggs hatch, and the young turtles, each small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, squirm to the surface, emerging from the sand in mass and making their desperate dash for the sea. Along the way, debris, pitfalls, crabs, gulls, raccoons, and other threats eliminate roughly 50% of those who rose from the sand. For those that actually reach the surf, they trade one set of threats for another, as they first face the repelling force of the waves and then find a whole new host of predators awaiting them. Various fish, dolphins, sharks, and seabirds as the young turtles come to the surface. For their first few days of life, should they count themselves amongst the living, the vulnerable turtles swim frantically forward. Ultimately, they will often look to settle in a patch of flotsam, preferably a patch of floating seaweed. Now, for the next several months, they will seek to avoid those that would eat them, find that which they might eat themselves, and not fall to the pressures of challenging weather or unfortunate currents. In this phase, roughly 50% of those who reach the surf will perish. Ultimately, with the passage of years, the survivors will increase in size, from that of a dinner plate in year one to that of a dinner table, in the case of one species at least, the leatherback, a decade or so later. With size comes some measure of protection. The only truly worrisome predators now are some of the larger sharks, bulls, tigers, whites, and the occasional killer whale. At approximately 2 decades of age, survivors will be old enough themselves to breed and continue the cycle which their very existence heralds. Of those that began as eggs on a distant beach, now less than 10% remain. At least those were the odds prior to significant human interference. Over the past century, and in particular in the last several decades, human endeavors, from beach development to plastic refuse to poaching, long lines, nets, and even noxious chemicals, including oil, have upped the ante for sea turtles, causing their survival rate to drop to around 1% or less from each nesting cycle. It is this added human pressure which has pushed each of the 8 sea turtle species into either a threatened or endangered state. For while they have evolved to overcome a host of obstacles, the most recent has arisen so quickly and at such scale that the species find themselves overwhelmed. So let's quickly recap the cycle of odds, using a hypothetical nesting season for females may nest multiple times in a single year, of 1,000 eggs for sake of ease. 1,000 eggs laid, 800 hatch, 400 make it to the water, 200 progress toward adulthood, 20 survive to breeding age, that is, without human interference. 2 survive to breeding age with human interference. So, a breeding adult sea turtle is the very embodiment of the long shot. It is the exception, not the rule. A jackpot. It is, in a very real sense, a miracle.
So yes, this is the life cycle of the olive ridley turtles and subsequent threats to the life. So what can you tell me are the threats to these olive ridley turtles when they are young, when they are at the egg stage or they are young ones? What do you think, what did you study as the threats to them?
Predators,
Predators, correct. Anyone else? Anything else? Okay, in the chat box, acha, seagulls, correct. So when they hatch out of the eggs and they move towards the oceans, they are subject to predators or seagulls, right? Anything else? Any human interference?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, then let's say they enter into the ocean. Now what happens in the ocean? Are there threats in the ocean?
Yes, ma'am. Some sharks or larger fish.
Okay. And what about human threat? Are there any human threats? Yes, what about the others? Other students?
Plastic and waste.
No, I did not hear you. Can you say it again?
Plastic waste.
Correct, plastic waste. Also, habitat loss. Where is the chat box? Yes, there is habitat loss. The beaches are no longer good for nesting due to human intervention. Yes, very correct. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes, so that is correct. Habitat loss, we saw that sometimes on the beaches also what happens is that the villagers, they will take the eggs for consumption. So eggs are also eaten, right? So therefore, again, at that stage, it's very risky. There is also very important, what we saw is a lot of plastic waste, a lot of other waste on these beaches of different places, right? So therefore, they have to encounter these regions because of anthropogenic activity of just throwing away waste in these coastal areas. Yeah. Yes. Anyone else? Correct. Human threat is adding toxic chemicals through sewage. Correct. They get caught in the fishing nets. Yes, that is also correct. And oils and chemicals. Yes. So in the oceans, because there are these huge ships that carry oil, there can be leakages of oil and other chemicals which can also harm them. Human threat, correct. And also they can be caught in fishing nets, correct. So these olive ridley turtles, actually naturally their cycle is very has a very low percentage of success, but because of human intervention, it is further decreasing, right? So therefore, that is again becoming a problem. Yeah, so already their life cycle is slow, but because of human intervention, it is becoming slower. Clear? So therefore, therefore we watch this video to understand the need for conservation. Yeah, and we need to recognize the different threats to biodiversity, at what levels there is dangers to the wildlife. Clear? So we all know that the population of wildlife, of different plants and animal species, it is decreasing. But we need to now look at what are the different threats to biodiversity. Is that clear? Okay. So now look at the slide. I have shared the slide. Okay. So look at the first reason. So when we talk about the threat, yes. Did someone say ma'am? Okay. There are two types of threats. The first threat is anthropogenic, which means it is man-made, and the other one is natural threats. So naturally the animal can be that way, right? So let's look at the first threat, which is man-made, is the loss of habitat. Okay, so look at the screen, loss of habitat. Now there is loss of habitat is because of different number of reasons, right? So what is the major reasons? So conversion of forest land into agriculture, right? So conversion of forested land to agriculture, because as population increases, we need more mouths to feed. Plus in a country like India or in the developing countries, there is a lot of poverty. So therefore there is a need for agriculture, clear? But conversion of forest land to agriculture is again of a huge threat to the wildlife, clear? Because they are used to that particular area, and therefore a lot of cases of attack on humans is also seen. It causes loss of forest area. You must have heard of jhum cultivation. Let me write it in the chat box. Sorry, it is jhum cultivation. Right. So what is this? It is practiced in the Northeast region, where these local people, what they do is they burn the fields, they clear the farms, the forest area, and they start doing agriculture there. And then the next year they go to a new patch of forest land, they burn that forest and they clear it, and then they start doing agriculture there. Clear? So this is causing huge deforestation, right? So therefore it is also called as shifting cultivation. The local word is jhum cultivation, which is being done in the Northeast. Clear? But as we raise more and more awareness about the need for afforestation, it is necessary that we talk to these people about this practice. Clear? Have you heard of this practice, shifting cultivation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes. So this is what happens, right? Is that this is one of the traditional practices, but that should be stopped. Yeah. So conversion of forested land to agriculture is one of the major reasons for loss of habitat of this wildlife. The other one, look at the slide, is what does it say? Continuous increase in human population. And the demand for our natural resources, right? So again, we know that we need water, we need land, we need food, we need energy, right? So as there is going to be increasing urbanization, as there is going to be more and more population, there is going to be a need for more and more natural resources. Right from your industrial revolution, what has happened? Right from your industrial revolution, what has happened is there has been a lot of focus on developing industries, right? A lot of dam building activity, a lot of urban sprawl. So therefore mankind has used resources on an alarming rate. Okay, these natural resources are, again, they can be renewable or they can be non-renewable. If they are non-renewable, it means that once they are extinguished, they cannot be replenished. So therefore, all these escalating demand for our natural resources puts a pressure on the ecosystem, and we tend to clear these forest areas. We tend to clear natural ecosystems where already there are n number of different plant species growing. Clear? So that leads to loss of those plants also. So along with wildlife, there is also a loss of those plant species. Yes, then also habitat loss leads to the formation of isolated, small and scattered populations. Clear? So a very important effect of loss of habitat is that, these national parks or these wildlife sanctuaries, they become fragmented, right? They become fragmented, which means that, so what is fragmentation of a national park or wildlife habitat? Is that they, I'm writing it in the chat box, right? So what happens? Animals, they get divided into two regions, two sets of populations or many sets of populations, and they become scattered from one another. Okay, so that is also a big problem because they are not able to freely move across the region. They are not able to interact with, they are not able to breed with each other. And also it exposes them to a lot of risk. It exposes them to a lot of conflict with humans. So therefore, fragmentation of habitat is also a concern, right? So loss of habitat is the complete loss of shelter, but the fragmentation of habitat is the breaking of their shelter, formation of small scattered populations. Yeah, so there is a difference between these two, and they are both very, very dangerous. Okay, and because if there are small populations of animals, what happens? They tend to breed within themselves, right? In the existing fragments, in the existing populations, they tend to breed within themselves, which is called as, again, inbreeding. And therefore, if there is excessive inbreeding, what happens? The diversity of DNA is reduced. Okay, so the number of different types of genes are reduced, and therefore it makes them more susceptible to environmental changes, and it can also lead to extinction of species. Yes, so so are the computer science and computer application students following? If there are fragmented, scattered populations of wildlife, then what happens is there is inbreeding within themselves. And if there is inbreeding, then what happens? The diversity of DNA decreases. The more the more exchange of different richer is the species. But if there is the same DNA is getting passed on from one generation to another, then it causes loss of DNA diversity, which is the meaning of gene pool that you can read here, right? But I'm explaining this term to you. So if you have any questions, these computer application, computer science students, so you can ask them in the chat box also. Yeah, so more of inbreeding leads to the loss of DNA diversity, and then therefore it can also lead to extinction of species. Yeah, so it leads to the loss of genetic diversity. Okay, because we want to encourage different types of genes, we want to encourage different type of DNA. Okay, but the loss of habitat or the fragmentation of habitat leads to these reasons, these effects. Okay, now you can see here there's a lot of farming done, or there is deforestation done for the purpose of logging, for timber. A lot of wood is used for furniture. So the loss of habitat is one of the main reasons it poses a huge threat to these wildlife. Yes, everyone is clear with this? Okay, all right. So let's look at the second reason. What are the other threats? Can you tell me, students, can you tell me what are some more threats to biodiversity? What do you think? So why do you think the population of wildlife is decreasing? Or why do you think the number of plant species are diminishing by the day? What are your thoughts on this? What do you think the reason might be? Anyone? Yes, Shoaib, Aryaman, Saud, Subhashish, Ketaki. Where are these other students? Chaitrali, Abhishek, Abhishek Patil, Aditya, Rishikesh, Harshvardhan. Yes, human encroachment, correct. Poaching, correct. Again, that is very correct. Anything, anyone else? Yes, Mittal, Maitreyi. Why do you think the wildlife is decreasing, or what are the threats to the life of these animals, or why do you think the different plant species, they are diminishing by the day? Is there any specific reason? Like, for example, just recently the tiger census was done, right? I think in 2018 or 19. And actually there has been an increase in the number of tigers in India, which is a good thing. But what can be the reason for decrease in lion populations? Or what can be the reason for decrease in elephants in India? Yes, anyone else? Okay, habitat destruction. So just now we just discussed habitat destruction. Do you have anything else? Climate change. Yes, Saloni, very good. Climate change is correct. Hunting, Shivai, that is correct. So hunting, increase of concrete jungle. Yes, so you mean to say urbanization, right? So excessive urbanization, the sprawl of cities into the different ecosystems around. Food requirement, what do you mean by food, Dipesh? Uh, Making ornaments, yes, that is also a very, very sad reality. Okay. Yes, so since we're talking of that, that makes sense, that makes this second point. So a huge threat to these animals, to biodiversity, is poaching. Correct. Okay, so Dipesh, you're talking about the decrease in lion population. Okay. Yes, exactly. I'm coming to poaching. So it means illegal hunting, right? Poaching means hunting of animals. So it is the most sad thing, the most angriest populations. Um, the most unethical thing that goes on in the environment around us is this hunting of animals, the illegal hunting. And especially, why are they killed? Why are these animals being killed? For various, for their various body parts, right? Like, for example, skin, the tusks, the hair, the horns, right? And there is huge amount of illegal trade that goes on within these with these different body parts, right? I think when we saw the Asiatic elephant, you know that the male elephant has tusks. The only the male has the tusks, not the females. So therefore, they are hunted on a huge scale. Now, what do you think? So, where do you think? Which country do you think is the leader in the illegal trade of wildlife? Can you make a guess? So where in the world is a lot of this illegal poaching, and the illegal wildlife trade that goes on? No one? Okay, Africa. Students are saying Africa. No, not USA. It's actually China. So the Nepal-China border also, yes, Yogesh is correct. Yes, is China. So also the Nepal-China border. So animals are hunted for these body parts because they have something called as CTM, which means Chinese traditional medicine. So Chinese traditional medicine. So they use these animals for a lot of medicine, right? And also for different products, right? So this ivory tusks, then the skin is used for a different number of leather products, right? So it is the most sad reality today, is that animals, they fall prey to various traps. So actually traps are laid out in the wild for killing these animals, and a huge amount of illegal trade goes on here. So the international market actually is very active, and therefore it results in the hunting of big animals, right? Then also there are many animals who have gone into extinction because of poaching. Like for example, if you remember, I told you the Indian cheetah, the Indian variety of cheetah has become extinct, right? Because of excessive hunting. Yes, people also poach for game, correct? Um, or also trophy hunting, right? A lot of trophy hunting also happens. In the British era, there was huge amount of poaching for game, also trophy hunting. Especially again in the princely states in India, also there has been a trophy hunting, and therefore the populations of these big cats, tigers, lions, they have decreased. The panther, the black panther. Do you know it was recently spotted? Have you heard of it? Do you know where it was spotted? The black panther? No one? So there's a wildlife sanctuary, Kabini, where the black panther was spotted. The image became very popular on social media. So have you read the Jungle Book? Has anyone read or have you watched the movie Mowgli? So in Mowgli, one of the heroes is the panther, right? But and the story of Mowgli was written and based in India, the Jungle Book, right? But look at the case of the panther. Is that when the book was written, the animal was present in plenty, but now today it has become very endangered. So you can imagine over the years how much habitat was destroyed, or the animal has already stepped into extinction. Clear? So this is what happens with a case of poaching or hunting, just trophy hunting. Clear? Yes. So like I said, Tibet, China border, tiger skins, elephant tusks. The cost is also very less. So if they get it illegally here, the cost is very less. So do you know that your turtles, right? So you're not supposed to keep turtles as pets in your homes. That is also against the law, but people still do, right? Your there are some birds also that are not supposed to be kept as pets, right? So especially, or even uh, some varieties of pigeons. Like if you remember, I told you the passenger pigeon is now totally extinct. So is the pink-headed duck. Is that clear? So therefore, along with loss of habitat, we know that poaching is a big concern, and therefore huge amount of international trade goes on in this. The international market is very, very active. In Africa, I think someone mentioned, right? In Africa also, the population of these giraffes and zebras is declining because of a lot of poaching, right? And you must have also heard about chimpanzees. So a lot of chimpanzees are also being threatened. They are already in the critically endangered stage. Also these gorillas. Clear? So therefore it calls for conservation activity, which we will actually study tomorrow in our next lecture. Okay? Has anyone brought photographs today? Has anyone got photographs to share with the class? Okay, so will you remember to bring it next class? So next week, on next week, Wednesday, we have a lecture, right? And I think yesterday we discussed, like many students spoke about their own experiences. So if you do find images, you can bring them next class. Okay, yes. Now look at the third reason. Very important again is the man-animal conflict. When the animal enters human territory and it kills from fear, right? So the man-animal conflict again is a leading reason for the decline of wildlife. There is actually a thought that says that, you know, the animal is not entering into your farms. You have entered into the animal habitat, right? So these animals, they are used to going to that particular region from generations together. It is sort of in their DNA. But as human needs are increasing, as humans are doing a lot of excessive farming, they are doing construction activity, laying of roads, then also railways. All of this is exceeding human interference into these forest areas, into these habitats, and therefore it is causing a lot of man-animal conflict. Even in the south, like you must have heard, in the south, these elephants, they are unable to cross railway lines, right? There are some railway lines that go through the national parks, and these elephants, they are unable to cross. Right? It also leads to conflicts. It leads to a lot of accidents. You must have seen photos or videos of, you know, animals walking on roads, right? Especially tigers with their young ones, with the young cubs. So this is all because of excessive human encroachment. Do you know why the Jim Corbett National Park was established? Where is the Jim Corbett National Park? Yes, correct. Correct. It's in Uttarakhand, and you know what had happened is, in the British era, because there was so much hunting of tigers, these tigers, they had turned into man-eaters, right? So the entire Kumaon Himalayas region, right? You know, Nainital, Mussoorie, that region, Uttarakhand, all the way down to also UP. This region had become uh, a very it had become sort of infamous for a lot of man-eaters. Uh, the problem again with these man-eaters or these man-eating tigers is that once they become man-eaters, it becomes very difficult for them to reverse their nature. And therefore, they always then crave for more and more human flesh. So because these animals, they started feeling unsafe, right? Because there was so much hunting that was done in the British era. So what happened is, Jim Corbett, he was the first one to establish a national park, and sort of realized the need for these animals to feel safe so that they don't turn into man eaters, right? So if animals are feeling safe, if they have free open areas for breeding and for raising their young ones, then they don't feel like retaliating back, right? So they're very assured of the territory. So therefore, the Jim Corbett National Park, I mean, was first established with the aim of stopping these man-eaters, right, or reversing the man-eaters of the Kumaon region of the Himalayas. Yeah, so similarly, other national parks and were also established. But the first national park to be established in India was the Jim Corbett National Park. Similarly, for the other animals, like for example, Gir in Gujarat, the national park was established for lions. In southern India, we have many national parks for elephants. So with this motive in mind, these conservation activities started taking place, right? So the whole idea behind man-animal conflict is that man is exceeding his boundaries. It is not the animal who is encroaching your land, but you have encroached into his land, right? You must have observed, these cows or goats, right? Sheep, they walk on roads. They sometimes even sit on roads, right? You must have seen it. Um, or they have a particular pathway from which they walk every day. And so you must have seen this. But the case that, what happens is that people say that they have come onto the roads, they just sit on the roads, they walk on the roads. But that is not the case. These herders, right, or grazers, these grazing community that we have in India, they have been taking animals for grazing from one particular pathway from generations together, right? And therefore, these animals have it in their DNA. They already know the route. What happened is you built the roads on the pathways that these grazing communities used to take their animals. Okay, and therefore now it is causing conflicts between man and animal. Okay, are you understanding this phenomenon? It is called as gentrification. Is that roads are built on the roads that animals used to take, on which domesticated animals used to go for grazing. You build the roads on that road only instead of building somewhere else. So of course the animal is going to come onto your roads, right? So does this make sense? Are you following this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so it is called as gentrification, and therefore leading to more and more animal conflict, man-animal conflict. So more the humans are allowed to interfere with a natural cycle of these animals, more is going to be the problem. Is that clear? And there is also another problem of coral bleaching. Coral bleaching is also, so bleaching is one of the, so look at the diagram, look at the picture. So a healthy coral is actually a nice and colorful coral. But what happens is when the living entity, when the zooplankton, it leaves the coral, then it becomes just a white shell, right? It looks bleached. Bleaching means to make it white. So coral bleaching is one of the phenomena that has been observed on these reefs for a long time now. For example, the Great Barrier Reef, which is, in Australia, it has been experiencing this event since 1980s. Yeah, so what happens is because of coral death, the nice and colorful corals, they turn into a white color patch, which is basically just a dead coral. Right? So therefore, even in India, right? So we have corals in Tarkarli, many places in Konkan, Goa, also Andaman and Nicobar. So all these regions are where we have excellent corals. But if you go today to scuba dive, you can also see it with yourself. Like last year, one of your seniors, she got an image of Goa where she had gone scuba diving, and you could actually see just white corals, right? Which means that they are actually bleached, they are actually dead, right? They don't support any biotic life. Even in the case of the Great Barrier Reef, you can see it from the helicopter. So before it used to be seen as nice and colorful, but now you can point out white patches of it. Right? Why is this happening? Why are the corals bleaching? It's because of polluted waters and also increase in the temperature of water. So if there is a lot of industrial waste that is being led into the oceans, what happens? The industrial effluents, they have a greater temperature than the ocean water, and therefore the ocean water rises. This change in temperature affects coral health, right? So they are not like us. They do not adapt to climate. As climate changes, they cannot adapt to it. For them, temperature is very, very important. If it fluctuates, it is going to affect the health. Yeah, so therefore, for healthy corals to be seen, the water must be clean and the water must have a certain amount of room temperature, right? So if it is not the case, then it is going to cause this phenomenon, this global phenomenon of coral bleaching. Is that clear? So therefore, it calls for more and more conservation activities, which we are going to be studying in our upcoming lectures. So more and more conservation activity is required to avoid all these threats. Okay. The other threat that is again seen, other than loss of habitat, then you have poaching, coral bleaching, then there is also man-animal conflict, right? Is the case of again pollution, right? Of course, there is a lot of oil spills, like I told you, like you already saw in the video. Because of oil spills, these animals, they get coated with oil. Like for example, look at this accident that had happened in the Gulf of Mexico, where these big tankers, which were carrying petroleum, so your BP, Shell, Exxon, all these ships that were carrying oil, there was huge leakage, and therefore the entire Gulf of Mexico was covered with oil, right? So you can see huge amount of fishes that died, and even these water birds, these wetland birds, they became covered with oil here, and therefore they suffocated. This caused a great amount of loss of marine biodiversity. So oil spills are again not only for fishes and wetland birds, but also these big animals. Like in the video you saw olive ridley turtles, but also your sharks, right? Your whales. All of these are also susceptible to a lot of these oil spills, and therefore leakage, a lot of suffocation due to covering of their surfaces by oil. The the next reason for pollution is again algal blooms. So you must have observed a river which is covered with a green mat. Uh, that green mat is nothing but algal blooms, right? Yes. So for the computer students, so algae is nothing but that green color moss-like growth that happens. You must have seen near wells or on rivers, like especially near Aund. If you cross at Sangam Bridge, you can see it on the river. It is just covered with green blanket. That is nothing but algal bloom. And why does that happen? Why are these algal blooms happening? Is because of polluted river water. So it is an indication that the river water is polluted with heavy metals, with a lot of chemicals. Okay, so even though it looks pretty, it is not a good indication, right? It is an indication of heavily polluted water. Okay, so because there are a lot of chemicals that are just discharged into the river water, and therefore they cause these algae to grow. And once these algae start growing, they block the penetration of light. They also block oxygen, and therefore the fish population which lives below in the river or in the lake is unable to get sunlight, unable to get oxygen, which causes a huge loss to the aquatic ecosystem. Yeah, so algal blooms are a threat to biodiversity. Uh, just the algae grow and nothing else grows. So there is loss of species of a huge population of fish, right? And of course, noise and heat. So noise and heat are again also a concern. If there's an industry next to next to a national park, right? It is going to work 24/7. It is going to cause noise at irregular intervals, which is going to again disturb bird populations. It is going to disturb your migrations of birds. So therefore, again, noise becomes a huge concern. And the last one is plastic accumulation. So next class, we will watch again a very short video on plastic. So, plastic is dumped into the oceans. And what happens, these fishes, they eat plastic chunks. They think that they are small fish, or they think that it is a food particle, and they tend to eat these plastic chunks, and therefore they get suffocated. Their stomach becomes heavy, and therefore it causes death of aquatic life. So plastic accumulation and disposal of plastic waste into the oceans is again a huge threat for diversity. Plastic is not only accumulated in the oceans, but even in landfills. Clear? So the whole case of plastic, we will again see next class. We will watch a very short video about this. It is called as Plastic Ocean, where we will look at how plastic, which is put in one part of the world, it circulates to the every country. It circulates across the different oceans. Yes. You have a question? Did someone raise your hand? Was it Shivai? Okay, so that is the case of last one, that is of heat. Like I already told you, is if effluents are discharged into river, or if there is, in general, a rise in the temperature of the ecosystem, it affects the insects. It affects your butterflies. It not only affects these insects, it also affects your, your vector population. Even it affects your, there is a whole case of vectors, right? So you have sandflies, right? There are different types of snails, right? So these centipedes, so these insects, these small organisms are heavily affected by the change in temperature. Yeah, so this is the case of heat. Next class, we will look at what is the case of climate change, and also we will look at what are how are exotic or invasive species affecting biodiversity. We need to look at these reasons of how they influence biodiversity. Is that clear? So do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, fine. So your internal test will be announced. It will be put on your groups, and the syllabus will also be announced. So you can, there is time for it, but it will be just it will be MCQ type, and it will be one small assignment. Okay, so the details of it, we will announce it in your class, in your groups, so you will get the notice. But it's just, MCQs, and there's a small assignment of 5 marks. Is that clear? And of course, the syllabus is what we will cover in class. So by next week, we will be able to finish this unit of biodiversity and conservation. So, I mean, don't worry about the syllabus. We will finish it well in time for you to study. And the details of the test will also be announced. Clear? So if you have any doubts, you can ask next class also, which is on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Let me take your attendance. So I will share the form for attendance. Just check whether it is open. So you can save the link actually. You save the link for the attendance form. It is the same every day. I will paste it in the chat box. The link is actually the same as yesterday. Okay, you can find it here. The link is again in the chat box. So you save the link. Yes, Shreya, share the PPTs. Yes, so I will share the notes with you. I will. Okay. I will send it in the groups with your coordinators, with your teachers, and you will get it from them. So link is in the chat box. Attendance is only on for 2 minutes. Huh? Quickly fill the attendance, and we will meet next class at 5 o'clock on next Wednesday. Yes, that does happen. Yes, with poaching, it does happen, so, they, instead of just, there is a particular way in these traps are laid, right? So even if there are so many forest officials, there is some amount of corruption. We always know that. Also, the animals, therefore, once they die, right? Once animals meet a natural death, what is done is to avoid poaching. They are, buried. So therefore, care is taken. Also, we have a lot of geo satellite images to track down the forest. But yes, these things do happen, right? And for just a small part, like just for the tusk, the entire animal has to be killed, right? So that is the most that is the concern, right? So therefore, these activists, you must have heard of Maneka Gandhi. They have done good work to raise awareness against this phenomenon. Yes, that's a good question. Yes, okay. So if you have no questions, we will stop and we will meet on next Wednesday.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.